Okay, so there's three major topics that's happened, three big major news events that happened in the last several days. The first one was actually seeing the Tesla bot dropped. Have we forgotten about that already? This was a new hand and forearm with double the degrees of freedom now attached to the bot. 22 degrees of freedom in the hand, 3 in the wrist and arm. They described it as, real time. The demo was real time teleoperated, showing the bot able to catch a ball. Elon says it'll be able to juggle next quarter. What's impressive about this is the low latency, and they described it as high kinematic accuracy teleoperation. And Elon then said later that making this autonomous is something that fairly trivial. They'll be able to do as well. So that was a big drop that happened right on Thanksgiving. And then, of course, we had FSD version 13. According to this one Tesla engineer, it was powered by Cortex, which is the new AI training supercluster built at Tesla's headquarters. It's got 5 times the training compute scaling. It's got reduced photon to control latency by 2 times. And you can now start from park with a touch a button, and it's park to park. It can start at any park position, and it can end in nearly any parked position. And then finally, of course, we had the Judge McCormick rejecting the bid by Tesla to reinstate Elon's pay package. So we've got Chuck Cook here. He's one of the few people that was able to actually test out version 13. And the question some people are asking, Chuck, number one, is this ready to go roll out wide? You had a post saying you think it's safe enough. And 2, how much of an improvement is this? And are we going to see a ChatGPT moment sometime in the future?
Thank you for inviting me, Herbert and Jeff. It's great to be here with both of you. Yes, just short answer, this needs to go wide. And the reason this needs to go wide is because it is better than 12563, which was the latest model I had on my Model Y before that. The issues that I saw with V13, which were some of the things they said were working, aren't always working. Like it doesn't always park, it doesn't always unpark, it kind of gets stuck in some spaces. Today I had a sunlight disengagement, but that happened on the previous version. But overall, this is a better version than the previous version. So there's no reason in my mind, unless I don't see something that the team sees, that this shouldn't go wide exactly where it is today. Now, there may be some software release schedule planning, timing, branch migration, planning that they have that I'm not aware of about where they want most of the fleet in order to collect data or something. But there's nothing on this build that I was even remotely hesitant about saying this is unsafe. Generally, V13, it's not as big a leap as V12 was. While V13 may be the build branch that goes unsupervised in 2025, like they predict, but the leap to V12 from V11 with end-to-end neural networks felt like a larger jump. V13 added some functionality. It added some unpark, some park, which is kind of sporadically working. It is definitely much smoother, but the credit goes to the team that did this rewrite, that made it work this flawlessly without us even understanding what happened under the hood. Because when you read those release notes, this is a complete rewrite with AI4 data, AI4 cameras, Cortex training, a completely different data set and model designed just for this car. Yet it felt like it was just a jump from V12. Yet under the hood, it was a complete migration from one branch to another with completely different training and data sets. So hats off to the team for getting it out to public customers with just some minor little issues, but it's overall much better. So I feel this is another step towards autonomy. We're not there yet. V12 was a bigger leap, but I think V13 under the hood was a bigger lift to the team, if that makes sense. Be glad to answer any questions or take it further.
Yeah, what you had already dropped a number of videos. The one I saw this morning was pretty cool. It was instead of a 3-point turn, it was able to do like an 8-pointer or whatever it was. But what was your favorite, thing that the FSD 13 has done now that just surprised you?
So it is very cool to just get press the button to drive and not have to double click the stock. It just like the We Robot event felt a little magical because we were in a little bit of a carnival ride of a robot in the Warner Brothers studio and we could see it and feel it. Having that button that just said press to drive felt just that much closer to the Wii Robot. Like, oh my gosh, that's all I got to do is press the button to drive and it engages. Now, granted, pressing that button is nothing different than the double clicking the stalk on my Model Y. So it's physically the same action, but pressing the button and not having to touch anything felt like I could do this from the back seat. But there's just this weird thing that I probably can't describe. And in my videos, I use the best words I possibly can to just say it. You can feel the AI4 processing speed and camera resolution just starting to flex its wings a little bit. So that is my favorite feature, even though it's not a specific function, if that makes sense. So park on park, reverse, all those things are functions that are great, new things to have. But to truly feel the AI4 processing and camera resolution start to flex its wings is my favorite part of 13.
What's hurry mode?
So hurry mode. So Phil Dewan talked to me at the We Robot event about these speed profiles, and we had these speed profiles on V12.563 on highway, and then they brought them down to 50 miles an hour on city streets. Hurry mode is the next evolution of how the team is trying to solve speed control. Speed control has been a problem for a long time. It's like, when you see a 25-mile-an-hour speed sign, do you go 25? Do you go 23? Do you go 28? Do you go 35? And all of this management around local knowledge around what is the right speed here. And what Phil Dewan said to me at the event in Burbank is like, pretend you're talking to your cab driver or your Uber driver, and you're saying, "Hey, I'm in a hurry. Hey, take this bridge, whatever." He wanted these specific modes to be like you're talking to a cabbie or to the robo taxi of how you want the car to drive. So really, what they're saying is you're sitting in the back of the robo taxi or in the front of the robo taxi because there is no back seat, and you're pressing a button. Am I in a hurry? Take your time, or just drive standard. It feels like they're trying to create a button type of logic for your mood of how you want the car to behave. And in hurry mode, it immediately jumps to the left lane. It tries to go as fast as you can up to the maximum speed. In chill mode, it migrates to the middle, maybe even the right lane, and does much, much, much less lane changes. But we've had these lane changes, minimal lane changes, and that functionality for a long time. But in this new style, it feels like the end-to-end neural networks are really actually doing it better. And it has a much more human-like behavior, like Phil Dewan was describing when he said, pretend like you're talking to your Uber driver or your cab driver about how you want the car to behave. And I think they've done a really good job with it because it does have some above the speed, below the speed thresholds, and it's much less kind of quote unquote NHTSA constrained around the speed limit, it feels like, and it's pretty good. I would say it biases to speed more than go under the speed limit. So if you're a person that doesn't like to speed at all, you still have thumb wheel control to scroll down the speed to whatever maximum you would want. So if you were in a 75-mile-an-hour speed limit and it was going 82, you could definitely scroll it back down to 70 or 75, whatever you're comfortable with.
Yeah, so it feels like from watching your videos, Chuck, that it the driving changed. So not only did not only were these new features added, but what I think I'm hearing you saying that the driving there was more confidence, there was greater acceleration. It was more of there was like there's a shift from 12.6.3 to this version in terms of how the car drives from point A to point B.
It definitely has more. I hate using words that you can't see in a video, so I try to use the best words I possibly can. And I've had some people drive with me and to try to use their words from Hardware 3, and it just every single build we keep using the word, oh, it's so much smoother. So that smoother is even getting an antiquated acceleration term. But there was no doubt that this model, and I'm going to use the term model because it has a different data set, different camera inputs, and different training. This model felt more aware. It felt more prescient. That's not the right word. Please don't take that because I don't want to anthropomorphize it all like that.
We'll
But
strike the record. Don't worry about it.
yeah, but it pre-rolled. It almost saw red lights getting ready to turn green based on some other things. It felt more anticipatory, which, and oh, by the way, the release note said that it hasn't even extended its context window yet. It hasn't even increased the model size yet. So those were actually still upcoming releases for the hardware for build. But I also want to acknowledge there's a placebo effect. Every new release that Tesla gives us is like a Christmas present. We unbox it, we go make a bunch of videos, and we're all excited. And everybody that didn't get it is frustrated. And I want to acknowledge those feelings and emotions. And here in the first 2 or 3 days of this, while I do think it's better and should go wide, I want to acknowledge that in 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to be bitching about it just like we do every other build.
But I don't think I've heard you before drive a new like major release and kind of recommend it goes wide. I've always kind of, between you and Omar and others, it's kind of like, oh, this thing needs a little bit more work. And is this the first release where your major, release you're saying, yeah, it could probably go wide?
Yeah, I do think it's the first one on a very first release. I've said this is better than the last one. Even on the first version 12 build, while it did fix a lot of things, there were a lot of jankiness that I was like, oh, that could confuse someone. There were some jittery steering wheels. There was some stuff that just could create some confusion. But V13 does not have any of that I felt. So this is the first 0.2 release that I've seen as compared to the old one that I'm like, no, they don't need to even do a point release to go wide. As far as safety is concerned, there are things they could work on for sure. And maybe the team's strategy is, yeah, we planned on going wide on a point release anyway, so let's at least knock these 2 or 3 bug fixes out before we go wide. And that may be their strategy. And even the team said in that note on the end of October that 13.3 was the wide release. And I'm on 13.2.
Yeah, interesting. Herbert, that may be an interesting question, or somehow for one of us, somebody to get back to Tesla. Like, how did that leap get made? Where the first major release was very good versus it being kind of choppy. Did they change something in terms of their testing, or is this training on Cortex allowed them to do something? Did they fundamentally change something to get here? But anyway, interesting.
One of the features that Jeff absolutely loves, Chuck, is dynamic routing around road closures, which displays them along an affected route when they're detected by the fleet. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so I haven't even seen that yet. So obviously, if it's detected by the fleet and it needs V13, I don't know what that means. That's going to be an interesting one to try to create. But that is the first kind of quote unquote Waze type of feature of the fleet talking to the map data to say, hey, avoid this, which we all want for potholes and road closures and detours and all of these other things. And even hazards in roads like today. And if you watch my one little clip, the car very, very smoothly avoided a very large box in the road that could have had something soft or something hard, I don't know, in it, but the car went around it. If it has the true ability of marking that data and sending it to the fleet, theoretically that should be available to the next Tesla behind me with at least a minute type of latency. But I don't know anything about that type of network, but that's what that bullet point was alluding to.
Yeah, I watched your video, and anybody on this space, if you're not subscribed to Chuck, you should. It's $1, and you get to see this stuff real time as he's testing it. It's $1, and you have access to an airline pilot who understands how to test things, operate things, and speak in terms of providing real feedback. And we definitely appreciate the work you do, Chuck. You certainly should be following him too if you're in the space and you're not following Chuck. So thank you.
$1 for Chuck. Okay, Chuck, what was it that you've seen so far that you it's negatives, things that not doing well, things that you were afraid of, anything like that?
The only negative I would say, I didn't even realize on day one, it happened today on my full length video. I didn't post a highlight of the negative, but it is in the full length video for my subscribers and on YouTube of the name of the video is my FedEx run. And basically, I'm a beekeeper in Florida, and I'm doing a study with a graduate student at the University of Florida. And I had some samples of some honeybees I needed to take to FedEx to her down in the University of Florida. So I said, hey, let me get the cameras rolling. We'll go early. We'll try to get it in rush hour, and we'll go to FedEx. And I put the car in a situation to start with going to a cul-de-sac and having to do kind of a U-turn before we went and did the UPL. Very simple. And this was basically just double click and go. And right away, within the first 20 seconds, the low sun angle created a critical red hands disengagement due to being blinded by the sunlight. And I was like, wow, I didn't expect that. And we talked about it for a few minutes on the video. And then I double clicked it and went away. And it didn't happen again for the rest of the drive. And believe it or not, the rest of the 2 parts of the drive were total disengagement free. But the beginning of the drive started with that. And it just makes me think of, okay, so sun angle, the critical crash. And I know there were some NHTSA type of controls about visibility with cameras on the previous version, and we may have some safety layers still in there that could be removed in the future. I don't know. So that was definitely the largest negative, was today's critical disengagement due to the sun. And I have not been able to consistently get it to park and unpark when I thought it should or could. Today it did a very good one, but in many other times it didn't do anything. And yesterday or the day before, AJ and I were driving, and we went into park mode, and I said, okay, let's just do an auto park here. But it was right in front of a chained off area of parking spots, and it was very clear there was a chain there, and it was going to back into the chain. So the model and the occupancy network still has some vulnerabilities on very thin gates or chains. I know that some community gates and things like that have been much better, but it's just not blanket everything is solved. So they still have some resolution issues of backing into small little gates like a railroad crossing or a chain type of thing that I think I've exposed so far. So but I didn't expect it to actually work. I kind of knew it was going to trip it up a little bit, but it was just a further definition that the team has a lot of little things to work on.
You also said that the NHTSA stop sign has been changed. That's because NHTSA came in and said you have to do a full stop as opposed to a soft, slow rolling stop that every human does. Tell us about what that means.
Yeah, so the NHTSA stop. So the NHTSA stop, a lot of people say, "What the heck is that you're saying?" A NHTSA stop is the roll up to the white line, stop to 0 miles an hour, and then proceed to creep, so you get the visibility to see whether or not you can proceed. And at many stop intersections in our country, the stop line is well behind where you actually need to go to see if you can proceed and cross the intersection. And the quote unquote NHTSA stop that I refer to is this blatant and obvious 0 mile an hour stop well behind where you actually need to go to stop at the intersection. So it was kind of a compliance sort of issue that they added based on an investigation by the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration. Um, so on a few of my drives, and I even noticed it again today, it completely ignored the stop line and went straight to the creep location. But I will say there are many other intersections where it did do the NHTSA stop and then creep. So there is some sort of intermediary logic being applied where it chooses to do the NHTSA stop sometimes and not others. And I don't have enough drives to understand when it does one and when it doesn't. So, but that's what the NHTSA stop is.
Thanks. Okay, I want to ask Simon, when we did an interview just a week ago, asked you if FSD version 13 is launched and it's well received, could this be the ChatGPT moment? What will it do to the stock? You said nothing. You still saying the same thing?
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me, Herbert. Same thing. Like, I think, and I'm not trying to get investors like disappointed in like where the stock is going. We're in a bull market, and we're in a bull market for Tesla technically, and we're in a bull market. And so don't like overthink it. Just own the company. But like in terms of the FSD 13, like we're all like super geeks in here, and we're looking at like what's the advancements, and we love this stuff. I can't wait to get V13 and try it. And I'm constantly trying to, and so we're all sort of figuring this out. And these are big deals. Don't discount it. Like last year when Elon did his drive through California on a V12, this was a big moment in my opinion. But again, the market didn't react. So V13, so last night I had a birthday party for my 8-year-old, and there were a couple guys there, pretty smart investors, real estate investors, wealthy families. And of course, the papas are all over in the corner, and the kids are playing, and we've got the entertainment there. And I'm talking to, two people that own the Teslas, and one of them is a very prominent, wealthy Jewish mogul. I mean, in terms of like finance, a financier and real estate. And I convinced him to get a Model S. And for years, he would debate and say, you know what, I don't get it. I don't think it's going to work. He got one, and he comes to me every day. He's like, the best car ever. His wife just got one 6 months ago, and they'll never go back. But the point being is I'm arguing with him or talking to him. We have great discussions, and he says, I don't think it's getting there. I'm trying the FSD, and I don't see that as a viable business. And I think they're going to be years away. And so we're just talking about the regular person that doesn't see the quantum leaps or this, I wouldn't say quantum leaps, I would say this exponential improvements, exponential being, 10x improvements over a few months period of time. And as an investor, that's where we want to be invested when the market doesn't see it, doesn't see or realize those exponential growth curves. But if you're thinking like, is the market going to make this stock fly because of that? No. But the market, I suspect, and this isn't investment advice, I suspect the stock is going to move much higher despite 13. We can all point to 13, but I don't think that's the reason that's going to move the stock.
Okay. So I'm going to ask the same question to the panel members. What would you need to see before there is a ChatGPT moment? Is it version 13 when it goes wide, or that's not quite enough? You've got park to park, you've got parking lot, Spanish, summon, and you have a few other very interesting features that it can now do. What do you think? Start with you, Jeff, then we'll go Warren and Chuck again.
I mean, ChatGPT itself was in a kind of a very small beta, and then it was released, and there really wasn't much out there like it. In the case of Tesla, we've seen this, I don't call it slow progression, but it's been playing out in terms of, well, FSD's been in trial for years. And a lot of people on the outside of this can't discern that Tesla went from heuristic code to end, and now this whole thing's playing out. So I think the short answer is this is going to, first off, you can't define like what a chat GPT, quote unquote moment is. I think it's going to mean different things to different people. Brad Gerstner said, he had his chat GPT moment earlier in the year and realized that, this was something that, should be invested in. For me, it was studying the economics of the solution and then understanding the rest of the data set. That's of what's out there. And I don't know why more people just don't go do that. And maybe there's a set of skills that are needed to go do that. But I don't know why more people don't. There's very basic questions. So I think Tesla's already had the Chat GPT moment. Quite frankly, when you look at the cost of the end-to-end architecture, the power consumption performance of the end-to-end architecture, the scale of the end-to-end architecture and what they're doing in the data center, I think the battle right now is actually in the data center. What we're seeing in cars are decisions that were made many, many months ago, if not last year, on the data center side. And Tesla is winning in all of those realms. There isn't somebody that's building cars or providing autonomy, robotaxi solutions that has a better data center, a more capable data center, a more capable set of engineers that have architected how this whole system is going to work. There isn't something else out there like it. And then when you overlay the economics of it, of how much does the perception cost in the vehicle, and then what it's going to eventually cost per mile as it gets to scale, and the fact that there's 7 million going to 8 million, dormant, robots out there that will be awakened with this solution. That for me was the ChatGPT moment. And now what we're doing right now in vehicles, whether it's 12.5.6.3 to 13.2, is we're iterating to feature complete, which I think we got pretty close to on 13.2. And now Tesla is going to take this new Cortex. They're going to expand the parameter count in terms of what is actually in the vehicle and what the vehicle is actually using as a model count for perception. And now they're just going to now the thing is going to turn into the Hulk right in front of us and have even more superhuman capability. And finally, for me, that this moment of people call it the Waze feature. It's not the Waze feature. I mean, it is. I mean, it is, but Waze doesn't actually control your car. Tesla's the fleet is going to communicate with each other, and Tesla is going to take that information and control your vehicle. And for me, that was a huge moment as well.
Yeah, I'm going to get to you next, Simon, because I want to push back on something you said earlier so you can address it. So my definition of ChatGPT moment is when there's a public perception that something impossible is now possible. And yeah, we're not there yet, but there is a change in investors. And so, Simon, we had a rash of institutional analysts do massive upgrades. You had Stifel go to $410, which is the highest price target for Tesla at this point. You had, what's his name, Craig Irwin, a perennial bear, the person that CNBC brings up every time to play the bear part. He had a target of 200 something dollars. He now is a bull. It turned up. And why? Version 13 came out. People realize this is real. Go ahead, Simon.
So, well, two things. In terms of, I'll touch on Craig Irwin in a second, but Jeff is. Sorry, I'll try not to laugh. But Jeff's actually he's absolutely right. I think the ChatGPT moment is happening slowly amongst many investors. Obviously, the first to have that aha moment is within the Tesla retail community. And slowly we're seeing, so I don't think it's going to be a big wake up. And I think that's what's going to drive the stock higher and higher and higher, slowly over time. Well, slowly. And we're not talking 10% rate of return every 12 months. It's going to move up, in our opinion, much higher. But it's not not everybody's figuring it out at the same time. I guess that's what how I describe it. But in terms of, I kind of laughed when Craig Irwin upgraded his price target, and I was like, man, and he didn't have a $280. He had an $80 price target, $80, and then he flipped it to $280. Like, where's your model? Anyways, we won't go into the specifics of his reasoning.
But it flipped it to 380.
That's
380. Yeah,
yep.
380 from 80 to 380.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, this means nothing. Well, actually, it does, because he's actually one of the Wall Street analysts that FactSet takes into consideration. So it raises the average significantly. It depends on, you got to look at what the parameters are, because are you going to remove the top 5 or the top 3 and remove the bottom 3? Or you just take all the analysts on the street. It depends on what the parameters you're looking at when you look at Bloomberg, or FactSet analysts. But generally, that would raise the price. But what that signals is you've got the bearest of bears turning bullish, and it's going to happen one by one. So I don't think there's going to be, to your point, Herbert, I don't believe that it's going to be a ChatGPT moment. I think it's just going to be one analyst after another waking up and going through the same process that I went through as a portfolio manager 3-4 years ago, when I was convinced that the stock was overvalued, and I wanted to understand why there's so many people that are bullish on this stock. Now, I wasn't bearish on the stock in 2015 and 16. We owned it. But when it ran up in 2020, I said, this is getting insane. And I didn't look at it. But a year went by and the stock didn't crash. And I started to do my own research. And I started listening to people in this Tesla community. And I said, well, I got to prove them all wrong. And then I couldn't. So that's where we started getting more constructive on this and saying, this isn't a bubble. There's actually earnings. And when you, to Jeff's point, when you start modeling out, and we did some work on this past 2 weeks trying to understand, are we overvalued? And we started modeling out the FSD and robotaxi again. We're still significantly undervalued based on those future cash flows. Does that answer your question, Herbert?
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
Oh,
exactly.
let me, if I can step in, one more thing is in terms of, so where I can add value and why I step into these spaces, as I love to listen to your guys' perspective on the fundamentals of the business. I can't add as very much value from that perspective. I'm here to listen. But where I can add value is from the market perspective, because I've been managing investments for clients for many years. And we've done a pretty decent return, and I try to apply that in all companies we own. And Tesla is one of the well, it is the largest company. But so today in the market, I think this is significant, and there's some people in here, I'm sure, that are short-term trading or doing options with it, whatnot. But we saw this sell-off because of the negative news we saw out of Delaware yesterday. I know you guys talked about it yesterday. And had the stock been sold off dramatically, but it didn't. And we actually saw it really struggling, and there was zero volume on the day. And to me, that was a sign that, wow, you have the stock selling off on the lowest volume day in over a week. There was really nobody showed up. There was nobody selling, nobody buying. And at the end of the day, we saw some heavy institutional traders coming in with massive buy orders, and the stock started to shoot up. And to me, what that reflects is there are people still trying to get a position. And as a portfolio manager, I would look at a company and I would say, well, let's watch. Let's see what happens if the stock keeps falling at the end of the day. Towards the end of the day, okay, let's start adding a position to have that exposure in the portfolio. So as we're approaching year end, there's a lot of big PMs that are going to need to have, they call it window dressing, and they're going to need to have exposure. So when we see big volumes go through like this, they're heavy hitters, they're heavy players, they're buying big blocks of the stock, and there's a reason why. So that ChatGPT moment I keep coming back to, it's not going to be right away. It's going to happen, in my opinion, progressively over the next 6 months. And the market, the stock will rise a wall of worry. Despite everything, it'll just keep going up, though you think it should go down.
Warren. Sorry
Yeah,
for
I
making
mean, I
you
think we
wait
should
too long.
start with the Chat GPT moment itself had nothing to do with stocks or portfolio managers. The Chat GPT moment was when tens or hundreds of millions of people started using Chat GPT and other LLMs. And
Mhm.
I don't think we're going to see that moment with Tesla, with FSD, because there's only, by the time we reach this moment, there'll be 8 or 9 million cars out there, and probably way less than half of them, globally, and it'll only be in the United States. So, a few million cars in the United States will have access to FSD at the time that such a moment might occur, if it were to occur, which I don't think it will. And then I think the thing that will wake up the vast majority of investors. I loved when Simon mentioned the real estate, the very wealthy real estate guy, because I was in South Florida in the tech community. There was like a co-working spaces that I was, with these tech groups, startup groups that I was a part of. And the common complaint was all these real estate guys don't understand tech, because all the money in South Florida is in real estate, and all these real estate investors in South Florida are not interested in buying, investing in tech companies because they don't see them. So the fact that some real estate investor doesn't see a business in self-driving cars, that when anybody can model it with a napkin and figure out, wait a minute, that's a really big business. Okay, so the thing that will, and the other thing is, the Chat GPT moment for Tesla is not when the stock goes to 400. The moment for Tesla is when the stock goes to 1,000, 2,500, 5,000. That's, if you think about how ChatGPT came out of nowhere and became one of the most, I think it may be the fastest adopted app in history. You know, it exploded, and the valuation of OpenAI went from nothing to a very large number. So I think when the general public or the general group of investors, you know, the vast majority of investment is people who don't see what we see. When you have unsupervised robotaxi networks operating at scale, not Tesla opens a unsupervised network, you know, in Austin, Texas, with 500 cars, right? It's going to have to be significantly bigger than Waymo. Maybe it has to wait until there's numbers on financials before people see it. Or it has to be that the vehicles actually, the network spreads quickly and the robotaxi network is operating in, you know, 100 American cities, so many millions of people can experience it. I don't think the general public gets it until it's that big. Maybe somewhere in between. And then there's the question of the the people who like to play market timing games. My ballpark estimate is 90% of investors don't see it at all. 1% of the people in this space, and there's 9% who play timing games, who are trying to figure out when the 90% are going to figure it out so they can buy just ahead of that. And then there's a chunk of the 9% who are waiting to see when the rest of the 9% are going to figure it out, and they want to buy just ahead of those people. So I don't think I don't think the ChatGPT moment happens because it can't spread. You know, ChatGPT is pure software. It doesn't require, you know, significant hardware, so it can spread everywhere immediately. FSD can't spread because it depends on the hardware being there.
Yeah, it's interesting. Interesting feedback. You say that we have. I mean, there's a lot of vehicles out there, but it's not. You know, it's not like software that can just be loaded. It's on a website. I mean, ChatGPT was you could pull it up on your computer as a website. Then it became a phone app and so forth. And by the way, I still view the. It'd be interesting if someone could actually measure the amount of tokens processed and the actual you know, like how many instructions or questions or whatever actions has ChatGPT given, and what is the actual percent of quality good output from it? You know, FSD is like we're literally in the 90, very high 90s in terms of how well it performs, and some of these LLMs are just, to me, they're still very far off. But I appreciate your commentary on that, Warren. I just wanted to go back to Simon. I mean, that was really, you kind of like undersell yourself in terms of like what you're, uh, what you offer to the rest of the group. But it's super insightful to understand how investors think, how Wall Street may be thinking. And I think those insights, I think we should actually clip out those insights you had at the end of day trading, because it's kind of interesting. I know we're not worried about the every hour movement per se of the stock, but it is kind of interesting in terms of the behavior of it, what you called out of like how did the market react to basically a judge ruling that the CEO of the company, isn't, shouldn't be paid for the last 6 years of work. And I know some of you can correct me, and legally it was something different, whatever. But the point of it is there wasn't some, acute reaction in the marketplace. It soaked it up, and that end of day behavior, I thought, was very interesting. So thanks, Simon, for calling it out. It's very unique input. Um, so so we should keep answering Herbert's question of when is this moment for FSD? So I just butted in there for a bit and I gave my feedback. Warren gave his. Simon gave his. I don't know if there's other panel members. Herbert, you wanted to
Chuck
go
and
to?
Sat. Let's go, Chuck.
Yep.
Okay, I'll jump in. So I think Warren and I are fairly acutely aligned on this, in that I don't think we're going to have a Chat GPT moment in the way that the zeitgeist is thinking of what a Chat GPT moment is, because the breadth and the exposure. So let's go back to the Bitcoin boom and a few other things, and it goes back to the Thanksgiving Day tables, to where you get the insiders that talk to their families, and next thing you know, it just virally explodes, and everybody goes out and does it and says, "Oh my gosh, this is something." I do think our best hope is for FSD to go unsupervised and everyone just awaken and go, "They did it," because to this point, we're being compared to Waymo that's already doing it. And while their approach is broader, less constrained, and much, much more robust, we still aren't doing it yet. So I think the closest thing to an inflection point, to not use the word ChatGPT moment, is going to be the inflection point of where we're doing it the Waymo, better at the same time Waymo is, but better. And better, broader, larger scale globally, or however they want to deploy it. So to me, this next inflection point is going to be the delivery of unsupervised in an unconstrained environment with some sort of app that allows it to just explode. And then everyone will see it, at least at the consumer perspective of being able to go to an app and call a Tesla. Um, I think the insiders that all of us are on this call are inside of our own chat GPT moments, and we see what it's doing. But I don't think the world can ever see what we do because of the cost constraints to get inside of FSD and the Tesla community, and not to ignore the political divide that weirdly the US country is about Teslas and not Teslas, and how some people have decided to buy them and not buy them because of who we are politically. And weirdly, I think that needs to go away. And I'm very proud of the Northeast, or kind of the European countries not getting in that realm about EVs and just saying EVs are the way to go, and not turning it into a whether it be a drill baby drill or an EV tax credit or whatever political landscape you're on in order to support EVs. This is the way. And everyone I bring to my car and say, this is an amazing EV, but oh, by the way, the best part about it is the software. And that doesn't even have to be on an EV. This software has nothing to do with an EV. It just happens to be a software that the company that is creating it happens to be an EV company. So the licensing opportunities here, if that explodes, is another opportunity that will create a boom. So anyway, Warren and I are aligned. This won't be a chat GPT moment until we can deliver and compare ourselves to Waymo in a broader scope.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was gonna.
Sorry, can I ask a question to Chuck? Chuck and the rest of the participants. Do you think, Chuck, that you could actually put FSD in a car that's not an EV or computer on wheels?
Oh, absolutely. It's just a software layer. Now, granted, retrofitting any current platforms today may be, uneconomically impossible, but it's just a software stack with 8 cameras today. I think it needs about 10 cameras, but wherever you want to go, this is just a software stack that has nothing to do with the electrification and the battery.
I don't think I don't
No.
think Elon will license FSD to a gas car.
Well, that's a different question. I'm just saying this has nothing to do with the fact it's an EV.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't thought about the controls, like in terms of the individual, like the
Listen,
control
they're
out. Yeah,
doing it. Listen, Comma AI is doing it today with
yeah,
Android phones in a front. I mean, it's
yeah,
possible. It has
yeah,
nothing to
yeah,
do with the battery pack.
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. Yeah, the adaptation. I think your point, Chuck, is spot on in terms of this really this really expands when Tesla is not only selling this on Teslas, but it's the ability of it to be licensed. And by the way, I think that's the route for a lot of the Tesla valuation to just blow up beyond existing models, is that instead of Tesla having to ship a hunk of metal with their software on it, that that their software is licensed out with their development kit and and their AI and by the way, you do need the Tesla AI computer, and you do need you need a development kit to get this thing designed into your vehicle. It's a common thing in the industry, but this is going to be fairly complex. But I think that's where the Tesla valuation. I don't think anybody's properly modeling this today because it's kind of a zero for everybody until it happens. Kind of like supercharging was a bit of a zero until it started happening. And even today, it's still low usage because we're still ramping up EV everywhere. But I like your point and your call out on that, Chuck. It's just interesting. Just one comment to throw out, and then we can go and keep going. The other point I heard brought up was around just awareness of FSD. I thought about this. It has to be less than 1% of people, maybe even less than 0.1% of people that actually have awareness that there's a car out there that you can go and buy as a consumer that can drive point to point, address to address on city streets. I still think that that's a fraction of a percent that actually understand that that's capable. That's software that you can buy. That's a vehicle that you can buy as a consumer. Right now, the general media is telling you that, you know, if you want a robotic experience, if you want to be driven in a vehicle that drives itself, it's going to be, you know, one of these things with the propellers on it and all the different things out there. And it's one thought I've always had, and there's no need for discussion, just to throw it out there. You know, Tesla has this point system for referrals and so forth. What if, I mean, what if Tesla started, I mean, Tesla has all this data. Tesla knows when there's another Bluetooth Mac address or Mac ID, or even a different phone in your view, and scanning different, you know, Mac addresses. And Tesla knows when the car is engaged in FSD. What if Tesla actually started awarding referral points for unique, you know, unique bodies, unique people that are in your vehicle that you're showing the FSD experience to, and maybe there's some survey that pops up on their phone after the experience. Just a thought, but that's a way to really start promoting, and because right now I don't think the software was good enough, by the way, you know, 4 6 months ago to do something like this. But now it's getting to the point where you'd actually want to, you know, bring a lot of people into your car and show this thing off. But anyway, just a thought. Xander, co-host, welcome.
Hey, so you guys discussing like the 8 million Tesla vehicles, I thought that was limiting, and Chuck bringing up that FSD being licensed to non-Teslas is the path. And Warren, you saying that Elon won't license it to a non-EV, I think that is short-sighted in that it's all about safety. And if we're going to want the like if FSD performs safer than a human and it becomes like seatbelts and airbags, every manufacturer will need to adopt it, because if it's more dangerous for a human to be driving, now obviously I'm talking about like the final form, many years down in the future. So, do you still think, Warren, that he won't license it to non EVs?
Well,
Or do you think
many years in the future,
all
there will not
EVs?
be, many years in the
Okay,
future, there won't be gas cars.
okay. So we're
But
aligned. It's just that you think
no,
that all E.
no, Elon wants to, the mission of Tesla is to transition the world to sustainable energy. And making gas cars better does not transition the world to sustainable energy. It's not the mission of Tesla to make gas cars safe again. The mission of Tesla, I mean, just look at the mission statement. So helping gas cars get better and more competitive against EVs is not part of Tesla's mission.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And by the way, we're year like right now we need a licensing partner. We need somebody to give a development kit to, and there's probably, depending on who that partner is, you know, 18 months to 36 months of work to do to get it shipping in a vehicle. So we're talking a couple years away, and my guess is it would be an EV, and you know we'll see who the partner is on that. But yeah, that's where
Jeff,
that conversation go. Yeah.
do you think Chinese EV makers would move faster?
Yes, they do. They do, and this happens in other tech industries as well. If you look at the mobile phone and tablet and wearable development cycles, they're a fraction of what they are in China versus the U.S. And even Korea is on par with China in terms of development speed. So yeah, in general, they would move quicker. But I think Tesla's priorities right now are, you know, get it end to end, get it feature complete and rolled out in the US, and then get approval in, you know, China, rest of Asia, and Europe. I think that, like, I think getting Tesla approval is a priority. It doesn't mean that they're not going to entertain a licensing conversation or even sign an agreement, but I think those are the priorities: is getting it global in Tesla. But yeah, hopefully, you know, licensing conversation or a license partner is announced imminently. Warren?
Yeah, I'm actually, before I go, Sat came up, had his hand up, and doesn't have his hand up, and I don't know if Sat wanted to speak before I do.
Yeah. Sat, we're talking about kind of how is this moment going to be realized in terms of Tesla in their they're going to have a GPT moment. Everybody has different opinions on it in terms of how it can be manifested. I don't know if you have any thoughts on it.
Yeah, I couldn't. I just joined, so I didn't hear everyone's opinions. But my take is that for me, I've already had it, right? Because I'm in LA. Version 11 already had only one intervention when I drove from LA to Las Vegas. So in 4.5 hours, I only had one intervention. So when Elon said it's harder to see the improvements because it's much more incremental, for me, it's been incremental. It's already so good, right? So I see it as the areas where there's a lot of disengagements when they are having the same experience as I am, and the average person's like, "Oh yeah, it's no brainer if it's so good." And I looked this up. It's the same thing as the range anxiety. The very first thing in the early days, everyone's about the range anxiety. I don't think I can go to work with it because the cheap ones were like 120 miles, 80 miles, like somewhere around there. And Tesla came out, and the 2012 Model S is 265 miles, and that was like almost triple the range. So it's like no problem. And it was just getting over that awareness that you don't have any range issue. Today, it's 52% more at 405 miles. And then well, for even a fraction of the price, we get 300 miles on the Model, or 340 something on the Model 3. Somewhere around there, right? It's so much cheaper and so much farther. It's not even a question anymore. People are just asking, okay, what's the amount of miles they could go now, but not anxiety, right? So I feel like that progress is going to happen with FSD in LA. Like it's so good that version 13 and so forth is like, oh, now I notice another thing could drive into the parking lot or this and that, right? But the smaller areas or the other places that have different unique situations, when that part becomes almost the same as basic LA, I think that's when it'll become that shift over where general awareness will be like, oh, it's no brainer if you want safety, you should have FSD.
Yeah, I think you're right to compare it that way, Sat, and it's we're kind of all watching this. I think you're saying like, hey, we're kind of watching the sausage being made, and I think it's going to be a much different experience for others that see it for the first time now at this late stage of maturity. Great call out. Herbert, let us know how long we're going to go. We'll take a couple more questions and maybe check in with you. It was Eddie. I saw Eddie's hand, and then Warren.
Yeah, I wanted to change the topic to something else, but one quick comment about the ChatGPT that I haven't heard is that now that Elon's the first buddy, it's not hard to believe that, you could see it, with the president widely on the news. But this
Yeah.
morning on Wolf Space, so Larry Goldberg brought up that there was a Model 3, there was a hardware 3 car that's running FSD 13. And I was wondering if you guys could add color to that. And I was wondering if that's the reason why they kept the parameter count the same. As you know, how they originally said that version 13 was going to be 5x the parameter count. And so I was hoping that somebody could provide, either a link to that. But yeah,
Did you say
Larry
a
said that
hardware 3
there was
car?
some
A hard
confirmation that there was
did you say a
a
hardware
hardware
3
3
car or a
car
Model
already
3?
running version 13.
Yeah, it sounds like Eddie can't hear Warren. Eddie asked if that's the hardware 3 car, and yes, that's what I heard as well.
Yeah. So anyway, I didn't see that, but it's possible it's a Tesla. It's an employee. I don't know. But yeah, it's possible that was one of the reasons. Like, get version 13 up, get it going, get it out to 4. Hardware 4 and 3. I mean, it's possible. But yeah, it doesn't surprise me that it's running, like version 13 is running on hardware 3, and it's a question of when it's going to be released, not if. And maybe they did partition the parameter count. I liked your comment too about Trump and visibility. It's possible he's kind of been anti. He's been obviously anti EVs. Also, he's even said some you know he'll change, but I mean he definitely said some things that are anti autonomous driving as well. Especially if you're trying to get elected, you're not going to be speaking to people, truck drivers, everybody, like saying, "Oh yeah, this is the greatest thing ever." And by the way, it's going to eventually take a bunch of jobs. So there's things that people say before they're elected to versus after. but yeah, could there be this opportunity? I've even messaged or tweeted about this to Elon, like having almost like a coffee kind of like conversation with, with the president in a Cybertruck or something, being autonomously driven. I think it'd be a cool thing and kind of a spectacle for the world to see. It's an interesting. Thanks, Eddie. Warren.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I think we were talking earlier about the spread of FSD and eventually the spread of robotaxi, and Jeff mentioned China, which I think China will adopt FSD and robotaxi faster than some parts of the US. But I think for people who model the value of robotaxi, you got to recognize that the cost of the human driver in Asia, with certain exceptions, the cost of the human driver is so much lower that the value created by robotaxi in an Asian country is less than the value created in a Western country, in a wealthy Western country. Now, China's probably here in Thailand. I don't know that robotaxi will be competitive in Thailand because human drivers are so cheap. I think human drivers are a little bit more expensive in China, but I think the value created by a robotaxi in China is probably half the value created by a robotaxi in the U.S. because Uber is that expensive and human drivers are that cheap in most Asian countries.
Yeah, it's a fair point. And the value in some of those countries too, like they know they have a bit of a public safety issue, with accidents, traffic issues, and so forth. But you're right. It's both ends of the spectrum. Like they're more tech forward, like they communicate faster, so like it would spread more virally in terms of like the social media system, and they're kind of more tech forward. But at the same time, the prohibitive cost improvement from going driverless is less. But I think at scale, though, that I think that gap would I think it would be meaningful over time, but yeah, you're right. It would take a lot longer to get to that point in time. So it's a very interesting call out. Herbert, how long do you want the space to go
Yep,
for? I have to
unfortunately,
pop
I
off here
think
in a
both
minute.
you and I need to leave. Great points for everybody. We covered a lot of topics about FSD. Thank you so much for Chuck. I think he left now. Warren, no, he's there. Chuck's there. Simon, Xander, of course, Sat. Appreciate you all. Really want to spend a little bit more time on this licensing because this could be a ChatGPT moment, not only for the institutional investors, some of them anyways, but maybe some of the automakers. I know, Jeff, you had a banger post about this. Even Elon replied and liked it, which is this moment that boardrooms of auto companies need to start talking about what's their spending on R&D, but also could they, should they, would they need to now partner. So thanks everybody.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. We'll have I don't know if you want to continue without me, but yeah, it's
Nope.
Or we have another space. It's just it's an interesting thing of like, do you spend another dollar of where's it going? And like where do you actually terminate to on your current R&D effort? It's not only like, is the Tesla solution good enough? It's like, how much money are you willing to spend on what you're doing now, or how much longer are you willing to wait to not be getting the revenue from FSD? And these are the kind of calculations these companies should be making. It's not just one dimensional. And how did the drive look on YouTube for Tesla? It's the conversations about the data center, the AI factory, and also like how much more they should be spending on their own R&D. That's the point.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.